All right, let's jump right into this explainer. We're looking at the evolutionary arc of fear today, exploring how the living, breathing organism of horror fiction has mutated across centuries. You see, horror isn't just about jump scares or monsters hiding under the bed. It's a deeply dynamic mirror reflecting our biggest cultural anxieties. So today, we're going to unpack exactly how the genre has constantly evolved to exploit the specific changing fears of human beings over time. So, here's our roadmap for today. We're going to start with the roots of Gothic fear, then move into visceral and folk nightmares, followed by cosmic and psychological dread. After that, we'll hit modern digital horror trends and wrap things up with some award-winning contemporary scares. Let's get into it. When you map out this timeline of terror, it's wild to see how perfectly the genre adapts to whatever era it's in. I mean, we go from the 18th century Gothic foundations, really representing fears of the past, straight into the early 20th century where huge scientific discoveries ended up sparking all this cosmic and psychological dread. Then boom, the late 20th century brings us the golden age of body horror and slashers. And now, the 21st century has pushed our fears right onto our screens with digital lore and creepypastas. It's like the genre literally mutates to find exactly where we feel the most vulnerable. And the crucial takeaway here is that every single subgenre works because it targets a highly specific core human emotion. It's really not about what the monster looks like, it's about what it makes us feel, right? So Gothic horror leans heavily on dread and melancholy. Psychological horror? That's all about paranoia and suspense. Cosmic horror just crushes us with existential despair, while folk horror taps into social alienation. Then you have body horror targeting our innate disgust and revulsion, and slashers stripping everything all the way down to primal survival. These core emotions are absolutely the psychological anchor for why we love being terrified. All right, part one, roots of Gothic fear. Let's trace the origins of terror. Originating all the way back in 1764 with Horace Walpole's novel The Castle of Otranto, Gothic horror is, hands down, the bedrock of the entire genre. And what's fascinating is that the setting itself acts as a dark character. Think about it. Those brooding castles and crumbling manors aren't just cool backgrounds. They're actual physical manifestations of repressed desires and buried family secrets, just constantly whispering tales of forgotten tragedies. The fear here is all about the heavy, inescapable weight of the past. But hey, horror is always adapting, right? In a kind of hilarious twist of evolution, those ancient, terrifying Gothic ruins have actually spawned a much safer, gentler, modern offshoot. We call it cozy horror. Think of stuff like The Graveyard Book, or even movies like Hocus Pocus. They completely borrow that haunted autumn aesthetic, the old houses, the ghosts, the witches, but they pair it with relatable characters and an overwhelmingly positive message. It basically gives us all the fun of spooky season without the lingering trauma. Moving on to part two, visceral and folk nightmares. This is where we get into physical threats and rural rituals. So this is where things get genuinely messy. Body horror forces us to look inward and confront our most primal biological fears, things like disease, contamination, and physical decay. It completely blurs the line between normal and monstrous by turning our very own bodies into the source of terror. It asks this incredibly unsettling question, what happens when you are no longer in control of your own flesh? And you can see this evolution so clearly when you look at how body horror tracks with society's changing anxieties. Back in the 1980s, classic films like David Cronenberg's The Fly reflected this deep cultural fear of science and technology going grotesquely wrong. But look at where we are today. Modern literature, like Nick Cutter's The Troop, taps into our sheer terror of bioengineered parasites. And even more fascinating is a highly anticipated 2026 release titled Tradwife. This one uses body horror to examine modern domesticity and subcultures, exploring these terrifying themes of biological control. It's a massive shift. Now, if we step out of the laboratory and head into the woods, we hit folk horror. This subgenre is all about exposing the terrifying things hiding right in plain sight within old traditions. It draws its power from the land itself, ancient stones, forgotten gods, blood rites, the whole shebang. The true terror of folk horror is that violent clash between our modern, rational, everyday beliefs and the seductive pull of ancient practices that demand a terrible price. And the wild thing is, the dread of the old ways isn't confined to just one specific region or culture. It's a truly global phenomenon, tapping into ancestral roots literally everywhere. For example, films like Robert Eggers' The Witch perfectly capture the Puritan anxieties of 1630s New England. But then you have the 2025 anthology Silk and Sinew, which brilliantly shows how folk horror is being used to explore the unique, ancestral fears of the Asian diaspora. Fear of the old ways is, for sure, a universal language. That brings us to part 3, cosmic and psychological dread. We're talking about the fragility of reality and the utter indifference of the universe. There's this quote from H.P. Lovecraft that says, "The oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear, and the oldest and strongest kind of fear is fear of the unknown." And wow, does that perfectly capture the essence of cosmic horror. Pioneered by authors like Lovecraft, this subgenre relies entirely on existential despair. It's that gut-wrenching realization that humanity is just totally insignificant when faced with incomprehensible ancient entities. The scare here doesn't come from a masked killer or a ghost. It comes from the sheer, crushing weight of realizing the universe is vast and different and completely beyond our understanding. Meanwhile, psychological horror, which was heavily influenced by the rise of psychoanalysis, expertly shifts the locus of fear away from external monsters and plants it directly into the fragile architecture of the human mind. It thrives on unreliable narrators blurring imagination and reality. It takes safe spaces, like the domestic environment we see in Charlotte Perkins Gilman's The Yellow Wallpaper, and warps them into absolute psychological entrapment. It builds immense paranoia and suspense without ever needing a physical monster, basically proving that sometimes the absolute most terrifying thing in the world is not being able to trust your own senses. All right, let's jump into part 4, modern digital horror trends, viral folklore, and the internet age. What makes modern digital horror, like creepypastas and Reddit's r/no-sleep forum, so incredibly captivating is its strict, almost militant commitment to realism. On r/no-sleep, there's literally a rule that the community must treat every single story as absolute truth. This completely erases the line between author and audience, turning these forums into immersive urban legends where you, the reader, are actually part of the story. From early blog formats like Ted the Caver and the uncanny urban menace of the Smiling Man, right up to 2016 viral hits like Little Boy Blue, which uses this twisted monkey's paw cursed doll logic, the internet has essentially become the ultimate incubator for modern folklore. And finally, part 5, award-winning contemporary scares. Let's look at what's validating the genre's current explosion. To put this explosion into perspective, a staggering 7 nominees appeared in the 2025 Bram Stoker first novel category. 7! This was actually due to a super rare 3-way tie in the voting. But that number empirically proves the absolute tidal wave of fresh talent pouring into the genre right now. We are quite literally living in a golden age of horror, with incredibly diverse new voices bringing totally fresh perspectives to these ancient fears. And you know what? The big institutions are finally recognizing it. But here's the thing, writing these award-winning books is no longer just this instinctive, chaotic art. It has become a highly refined, almost scientific craft. Today's authors are using formalized tools like plot trackers to engineer pacing and tension. I mean, they're literally mapping out exactly when a floorboard should creak, timing the disembodied whispers, and charting out shadowy figures to ensure the atmosphere builds flawlessly. They are actively manipulating our psychology to maximize the dread, which is just brilliant. So, because horror is at its core a mirror reflecting our current era, we really have to ask ourselves one final question. As our technology and society continue to evolve at breakneck speed, with rapid advancements in AI, shifting social dynamics, and a constantly changing world stage, what terrifying new horrors are waiting to be born? What new subgenres are gestating in the shadows right now? The evolutionary arc of fear is incredibly long, and it's for sure far from finished evolving. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and definitely keep your eyes open for whatever comes next.